Welcome to the Informed Advocate Podcast. I'm your host, Sharon, and welcome. And so, on this episode of the Informed Advocate Podcast, what I want to do is something a little different. And when I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, this will be something that I will continue on. And so, one of the things I'm going to do and start putting in is you've already had like the recap of the recap, and that is mostly about the stress busters, because that is so important. Those stress busters are so important. They are the cornerstone of being a self-caregiver, definitely, and being informed of being a self-caregiver. So that's one reason that you will pretty much see those recaps, I would say, throughout the podcast, and I will make sure I will change them up as well in the future to have different variations of them, and where, shall I say, they're not always the repeat of the certain recording. But one of the things that I am going to do is have pretty much like a summary or a recap of the podcast and pretty much kind of like group them together. So this is the first one. And so this one will be pretty much focused on healing, focus on you taking care of yourself and the things that it takes. And so this is a recap of understanding stress and trauma. Healing takes effort. Medical conditions takes action. And then the recap of, pretty much the stress busters. And so what this is really just want to reiterate to you, understanding stress and trauma. And also what I've realized when it comes to when we're talking about trauma, to pretty much make sure you know which trauma that we're talking about. But again, when it comes to this, it's all included. And so in understanding stress and trauma, I'm trying to make it a tongue twister. But the basic understanding is the impact that it has on your body, the impact that it has on your mind, the impact that it has on your spirit. And when it comes to especially your body, remember that your body really doesn't know the difference between stress and trauma. And when we talk about trauma, there's the trauma of being in an automobile accident, of seeing someone getting killed, witnessing someone getting killed, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and assault, and all of that. Okay, those would be what would be considered the big T trauma. And then the smaller T trauma, again, the body responds in the same way. It can be where maybe someone had experienced something of someone yelling at you. And sometimes depends on what you're witnessing. Some people, it can be different for each person. And that's the thing, everything is so personalized. So in one sense, it could be someone could say, oh, that's trauma for somebody. But for you, like for somebody else to judge that, it may be a big T or a little t. The only thing that your body knows is a T, meaning that it's a trauma. And so the body really doesn't know the difference in the body, especially when it comes to chronic stress. And remember, when we talked about stress, is that it's like fender benders and accidents. So we can kind of look at that when it comes to trauma as well. And so in saying that, it's almost like when it comes, it's almost like understanding the basic human biology, that stress impacts the body And what impacts the body, impacts the mind, impacts our spirit, and creates all these chemicals. Trauma impacts the body, the mind, and the spirit. When we have that understanding in everything in life, you look at people different, and even you look at yourself differently too. And so it's really important to begin to have that understanding, because it doesn't matter whether you're a personal self-care giver or a professional self-care giver, it impacts all of us, and it impacts how we interact with one another, of what happens, and we're talking about, adverse childhood experiences. I just like to say all childhood experiences, because the way that we may interpret something, it can cause stress, it can be trauma. And so all of those things are within us, and we're living them out as adults. And a lot of it is subconscious. Some you may realize or have a realization of it, and we never know, how it's going to show up. So have an understanding of stress and trauma. Focus on you. The more you focus on you, then you have a better understanding when you're interacting with someone personally or professionally. The other thing is, in a previous episode, we had talked about healing takes effort. As I told you before, one thing that I have come to realize is that, especially when it comes to the mental health field, we tell people, go to counseling, go to counseling, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. And I would say, whatever is your choosing of getting help. Because we do definitely need to recognize that systemically, that therapy may not be the best for all people, not just culturally, but even when it comes to, individuals who may not have the insurance, to pay for it. So there is so many different things that's out there. And so, but in saying that too, people have there's this underlying message that you're not okay, not unless you get therapy. And that's not true either. It's like, yes, we want people to go to therapy. Yes, we want people to get help. I say get help, get the support to heal. But a lot of it is going to be on you. A lot of it is you sitting down with yourself, sometimes with the support of others, but either way, sit with yourself to do the work. And that is so important, because even with therapy, even with medication, sometimes for some people, it's not always enough. And it's just really so important for all of us. I mean, it really should start young, but for all of us as adults, we can no longer blame even though it's a part of it, but what happened to us is definitely time for us to go back and revisit those things so that we can be free, to support other people. And that's really the main thing when it comes to it. And so healing really does take effort, and it's a lot of work. It's not easy. It's painful. That's one of the reasons of where therapy can be very, very helpful. So whether it's therapy, whether it's a life coach, whichever way that you may decide to get the support, to get help, that is of your choosing. But one thing I will say, one thing that I have learned is that embodiment practices is a must, because now that we know what stress and trauma does to the body, there is no way that we're going to really truly it's not even about be healed, because healing is a process. And so I almost want to say it's never really a true destination per se. And you'll understand that better. And if you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. But it's peeling away the layers. At least you could say that may not impact you as much. And so, again, healing takes effort. And remember, everything is connected. And so when it comes to medical conditions, it takes action. We talked about this on a previous episode, in that whatever medical condition that you may have, do your research, find people. There's someone out there who said that they have recovered from something somewhere. We cannot ignore that. Even though the medical field has done a fantastic job in a lot of things, but at the same time, there's some things they haven't touched. And for one person, it does something wonderful. For someone else, maybe not. But one thing I will say, there is something out there. We cannot ignore whatever name you want to call it, the Americas, or the things that we just don't understand. That's how I like to say it. I may not understand it, but hey, if that person says it worked, we need to investigate this. And there are some things that may not be in the medical books yet, because if you know anything about science and best practice, it takes years for that stuff to even get into the book. Even when it comes to medication. So do you want to wait? Or do you want to try? And you have to do what's best for you. And this is where the informed advocate comes into play, is informed advocacy for yourself. And then for those who support others, do your homework, talk to people, see, I'm not saying, hey, just try any old thing. No, I have seen so many wonderful things out there. There has to be something to it, so the Informed Advocate podcast is really all about looking at everything. Do not discount anything, because if it worked for that person, it may or may not work for you, but it's worth investigating. It's worth investigating. And so when it comes to the medical condition that takes action, meaning like if you got something going on with your hip, do some research and say, hey, what exercises can I do to improve my hips? Is there any meditation that I can do? Is there affirmations? Is there food that I can eat that can improve this? So again, it's a matter of doing. Same thing, again, when we say healing takes effort, beyond going to therapy, which helps so many different people, beyond taking the medication is what you say, what you do, and how you feel about yourself. And then the one that I'm always talking about is the 555 stress busters. Again, they are the cornerstone of everything. The cornerstone of everything. And so, remember the 555 stress busters, 5 minutes, 5 days. It just continue. Continue those 555 stress busters, because the more you do those things, the more that it becomes a part of you. And so I'm not going to repeat it here, because there are at least 3 times in previous episodes that they are there. So go back and listen. They are in episodes 2, when I introduce understanding stress and trauma. They're in episode 3, the recap of stress busters, and then they are in episode 14, the recap of the recap. So I just really wanted to mention them here, because all of that comes into play, because with the stress busters, it's going to help you with understanding. When you understand the stress and trauma, this is where you use the stress busters. When it comes to healing takes effort, this is where you can use the stress busters. When it comes to medical conditions takes action, this is where you can use the stress busters. Again, and being an informed advocate is investigating what works. And again, just because it didn't work for you, it doesn't mean that it's the most awful thing out there either. Whether it's coming from the medical field or outside of the medical field. Because again, what works for one person may not work for another. It just didn't work. It's just trial and error. And so if people can trial and error medications, trial and error all of these other wonderful things that's out there as well. And so again, this is a summary of a recap of basically stress and trauma. Healing takes effort, medical condition takes action, and stress busters is your cornerstone. So thank you for listening. And for those of you who will be watching this podcast of the Informed Advocate podcast, and make sure you're informed and remain a self-caregiver so that you can support others. Because the more that you take care of yourself, the more you can support others. And this is where all of this come together for everyone. And remember, whether you're a personal self-caregiver or a professional self-caregiver, all of this is going to really help you to be in a place where you can continue to help and support others that you're already doing anyway. So again, thank you for listening.